What is up YouTube? I'm Galladite74 here, bringing you another top 10 video for my top 10 series. This week I'm bringing you guys the top 10 most underrated mons in Draft. Now, note before this video begins, this is all my opinions, so if you don't agree with it, then okay. Because having an opinion on the internet is not always the greatest idea in the world. But regardless, I hope you guys are enjoying this top 10 series as much as I have been making it. There is a playlist on my channel to check out the other two I've made so far. It's called like Draft Top 10s or something like that. I highly recommend it. I would really appreciate the support. You don't have to watch it in order to watch this video, but again, the support is really nice. I hope you guys are excited for Sword and Shield as much as I am as we wrap up the generation with this top 10 series. And before I get into this video, one last thing. This list is a little bit different as opposed to the other top 10s I have made so far. It's that, like, the other top 10s, I had a definitive, like, 10th place, 9th place, 8th place. While for this video, everything's going to be a little bit jumbled up. I almost made this into just 10 underrated mons in general because the list is just 10 mons I think are more underrated than others, basically. Well, I just put them into a list form, so, like, something's 4th and something's 5th. Note that I could probably just switch that around a bit and I'd be okay with it. The beginning of this list is pretty whack because a lot of mods just missed the cut, so if like there's a mod on there and it's like something's not on there, I like to know about it. So leave in the comment section below if I left something out of this video, just leave in the comment section below and talk about it. I would love to read about it. But without further ado, we're gonna get into this video. Okay, so we're gonna dive straight into this video. Number 10 is going to be Mega Aggron. Now, this is only number 10 because I feel like it's more underrated, but I have not actually used Mega Aggron in drafts. I've gone up against it, but I've never actually used it, so I can't really speak on behalf of using it. I know this thing can get chipped down, but the thing is, rocks don't chip it down. It's just usually spikes that chip it down. So that's the main drawback of Mega Aggron, but here's the thing. Mega Aggron's usually in like the minus mega tier, so it's not like in the best mega tier. And this thing's bulk is absolutely out of this world. Like, what is it, 75 HP and like 230 defense? You don't even need to invest in defense. You can invest that all into like spit def and become like a mixed wall. And this thing, while yes, it can get chipped down over a battle, can usually, it'll always do something because it has rocks. It gets great coverage. It stops setup from with roar and like toxic and all that. This thing is really good. It also has the filter ability, so firefighting and ground, like weak firefighting and ground moves aren't even doing much to you anyway. So that's why I had to put it on this list. I haven't used it too much, but like prepping like against it, I've always had a minor problem because of how bulky this thing is. Like this thing is always gonna usually do something, and it's not gonna get one shot ever. So yeah, that is Mega Aggron on this list, and it's just number 10 because my inexperience with it. Continuing with the mega trend, we're going to move into our number 9 slot, which is the last mega on this list. It is going to be Mega Absol. Now, this is the exact opposite reason I have it above Aggron, is because I do have experience with this mon. I have gone up against it once or twice, and I know how good this thing can really be. This thing has probably one of the hardest hitting circle punches in the game, and knockoff is a really spammable move, and having one of the best knockoffs in the game is insane. And you also have really good coverage as well. But the reason it's really on this list is because it's marked a little bit lower, and it has defensive utility. Now, you see those defenses and it's like, wow, that's really trash. And it is pretty trash, its defenses, but it has Magic Bounce, which is one of the best defensive utility abilities in the game. You can't get status, which is really big. You can't have hazard stack on you because you have Magic Bounce. And that is just a really good thing to have. You also have some good moves that you could utilize. You have Wish, you have Will-O-Wisp. I think Mega Absol gets Thunder Wave, I'm not sure. It gets Parasong, which I think is a really good ability. You have so much defensive utility despite having not that much bulk, so if you're going up against a really passive mon, you can take advantage of that with the moves that Mega Absol gets. So that's why I think it's a little bit underrated. Again, this is just because of my experience with it. And we're going to move on to our number 8 slot. Moving on to number 8, we have another whack pick. We have Lander's Eye. And when I mean Lando Eye, I mean Sand Force, not Sheer Force. Sheer Force is good and we know it, so I'm not going to put it in the underrated list. But I'm putting Sand Force down here because some leagues are deciding to unban Lando Eye with Sand Force, which is a pretty good decision in my opinion. But having it ranked like with like Mega Absol and Mega Aggron, at least in points, is just kind of meh because this thing still hits really hard. Not as hard obviously, but this thing is still really decent. And a real big selling factor for me is that it's mixed and it gets the 101 speed tier. That is a huge speed tier to hit because it's over 100. You outspeed a lot of those base 100s, which like kind of caps like the whole draft in general. That's what you want to hit. And having that speed tier with like that many points you would spend usually, that Lando Eye is mostly marked at, it's just really good to have. You have mixed options because you can run Earthquake, Earth Power. You have U-turn as well, defog, rocks. You have decent bulk. Ground and flying really isn't that bad of a typing outside of the the ice weakness. It has good resistances. Lando Eye can do a bunch of different things. It's almost like it's like Glide Score basically, but it hits better offensively. It's a little bit worse defensively, but you get the gist. It's usually a steal in most drafts, and that's why it's on this list. I see it like pretty lower. Maybe I'm looking at weird lists, but that's why I have Lando I on this list, and I think more people should draft it if it's just sitting there. So that is number 8. Moving into number 7 is our final whack pick before the list starts to get a little more like serious and relatable. We have 2 mons in this slot actually. I have Swellow and Linoon. Now I'm gonna talk about Swellow first because that's more understandable. Swellow I think is really underrated because it's around again that mid-tier section, and it is a really good pick because it can be special and physical or physical, and it hits insanely hard on both sides because Specs Boom Burst coming from that Swellow and Scrappy, not many things switch into it. Yes, you get your steel and rock types, but most teams don't actually really have a rock type, and most teams that do have a steel type don't have recovery. So if you're able to chip that down, Swellow can just come in and just boom burst away. It's got a great speed tier to take advantage of it, and I think this thing is really good. I think I underused it in my ABC run, and that's because I already had like Lele and Charizard and like all this offensive mons, so it sort of just got under like class there, but I still think Swellow is really good. And Linoon I want to mention because we all know what it does. Belly Drum, E-Speed, and coverage moves usually. But I put it this high on the list, or put it on this list in general, because this thing is actually really hard to deal with because you just give it one setup turn and you could just lose the game. Because of E-Speed and the priority it is, most of the time you can run a decent amount of bulk into Linoon to give you more of a shot to set up. And then once you set up, again, just +6 E-Speed does so much damage to almost everything. Again, yes, you got your steel and rock types that aren't resisted to, like, that resist Stomping Tantrum or Seed Bomb or aren't weak to it. Usually can take a hit, but that's far and few in between. And again, it takes one turn for Linoon to become an absolute threat. And that's why I decided to put it on here. I know that's a little bit of a weird thing to say, but I feel like even though people know what it does, I know how big of a threat it is, I still feel like people kind of underprepare for it. And that is going to be number 7. We have Swellow and Linoon, and we're going to move on to number 6. So that is basically it for all the weird picks. I know Linoon made the list. That's kind of weird. I thought it was weird to put it on the list, but I really do truly believe that Linoon is an underrated threat. But everything else on this list is probably pretty understandable for draft players watching this. So number 6 is what is on the thumbnail, and we have Lycanroc Dusk. I put this thing because I used it in a tournament, and originally I thought Lycanroc Dusk was like, it was okay, but I never realized how strong this thing really is, and the speed tier is really good. This thing has 110 speed tier, which is already amazing, 117 attack, my bad, and has Tough Claws. And this thing uses Tough Claws really well. It has good coverage moves like Joron, Sucker Punch, Brick Break, Fire Fang, Thunder Fang, I think. It gets a few other moves, Iron Head and Outrage, that's it. It hits very hard with its moves, and if you get a Swords Dance up, it's just, you don't really switch into it. I know Stone Edge doesn't get the Tough Claws boost, but Cell Rock does. And a Cell Rock is an absolutely fantastic priority move. It's one of the best in the game, in my opinion, because Rock is one of the most spammable types in the game, next to like Ice, Dragon, and Fairy and all them. But this thing, +2 a Cell Rock, can actually claim some KOs on like really fragile mons, and that is just a really cool aspect to have. As the same thing with like Linoon, the priority is just really good there. And again, the Rock type is a really spammable type. So Lycanroc, I highly recommend to anyone who hasn't drafted it to draft it at some point, even though I don't know if it's going to be in Sword and Shield. It might be confirmed already, but I don't know. But that is Lycanroc Dusk. It is number 6 on this list. Moving into number 5 is going to be Delphox. Now, originally, I'd never used Delphox up to a tournament I was in, another one, and Delphox did pretty good work in that tournament. It was the TTM one, and I really enjoyed it a lot. The reason it's above Lycanroc is because, unlike Lycanroc, I feel like Delphox is so overlooked because of all the mid-tier fire types that exist, like Darm and Salazzle, Arcanine, Chandelure, Emboar, you name it. There's so many. And I feel like you don't really look at Delphox too much because usually most trainers get like a fire type in their like tier 1s, tier 2s, tier 3s, or at least the higher point range, while Delphox is a little bit lower. But if you can't afford like one of those fire types, Delphox is a really solid tier 4 or a little bit lower tier points fire type because it hits decently hard with the special attack. It has really good speed and 104 speed because it's over base 100. It's a special attacker, so it gets all the hidden powers. Fire Psychic plus hidden powers, a really good combination. It gets like Grass Knot for those really fat ground types. So Delphox definitely does have some options. It has some decent defensive utility if rocks aren't up. It has like Wish, Will-O-Wisp, like Wish Protect would be a thing. Delphox definitely is an overlooked mon. I think it's more overlooked than good than anything because yes, it's not the greatest mon ever, but again, as opposed to those other fire types, it still can put in some work in a game if its matchup is pretty good. And again, the fire and psychic types are pretty spammable types overall, so that's why I believe Delphox should be on this list, and it is number 5. Okay, so number 4 on this list of the most underrated mons is going to be Scolipede. This thing is really scary. This thing is a big threat because it has speed boost. You do not need to invest into, well, you do need to invest into its speed, but you don't need to run a plus speed nature. You could usually run like an adamant nature and get away with it because of its speed boost. And the thing I like about this thing a lot is because it can do a bunch of different things. This thing has spikes and toxic spikes, so it can be a spike setter. This thing has, and the most important thing I think, is sword stance. Letting Scolipede set up, like you set up +2 Sword Dance, in 2 turns you have 2 Dragon Dances up. And while Bug and Poison isn't the greatest coverage overall, this mon is a great user of Z moves and it has like Superpower, Earthquake, Rock Slide, Aqua Tail. It gets good coverage moves as well, so it can pick and choose what it wants to defeat. And again, Bug and Poison isn't the greatest typing in the world, but if you do find a mon that you can set up on for free, this thing is a big threat really fast because you have to deal with it defensively. You cannot offensively beat this thing once it gets going because of the speed boost. And that is something I think is really big because even if you do manage to take down Scolipede, you have a defensive mon in that's probably going to be pretty weak, and then you can just keep on attacking. So Scolipede is really good on like more offensive teams than anything. And I think it's really underrated because not many, in a lot of drafts, people don't usually pick it up. And if they do pick it up, they don't usually use it too much. So I think it has a lot of potential basically for a higher tier. And that's why I have Scolipede at number 4 on this list. So number 3 on this list is a mon that I've always had trouble going up against when I have prepped for it. And that is going to be Archeops. Archeops is definitely one of the most underrated mons in my opinion, obviously because it's on this list, duh. But I believe this because it's not even bad until Defeatus kicks in. And I know Defeatus is a really bad ability, but until that kicks in, this thing is really good actually. This thing hits insanely hard. It has really good utility in like rocks, taunt. It gets roost to get out of Defeatus, and a bunch of other things as well. It gets defog, but it gets U-turn. So you can run like, if you're in a really offensive set, you can run a U-turn, Stone Edge, like acrobatics, basically. Basically, this thing hits really hard. And I think it's really overlooked because of that really bad ability. Obviously, like Regigigas is a bad ability, and I think it's still like it takes so long to get out of it. But at least with Defeatus, you're not even in it until like you're halfway, like your health's halfway down. And most of the time, Archeops isn't even going to be surviving most hits because it's frail. But this thing is just really hard hitting. If you use it really well and you get rocks off the field, this thing could just come in and just click buttons and kill things. And for it being really low tier, I think this is a really good value pick if you use it correctly, of course. So that's why I believe Archeops is number 3 on this list, because it is just so low tier for being such a high quality mon. As long as you don't let it become setup fodder, that's the one thing. But that is Archeops, and that is going to be number 3. Number 2 in this list is a mon that I've used to the most success out of everything on this entire list, and this is a mon I love so much. This thing is Reuniclus. Reuniclus is a fantastic mon, and I know it's being like ranked a little bit higher of recently. It's been going up a bit, but this thing is so good. You can make this thing into anything you want almost, except for like a fast sweeper, obviously. But this thing could be a trick room sweeper, just a life orb regen attacker with 4 attacks because its coverage is pretty decent. Defensive wall, Spadef wall, a pivot because of regen, a calm mind setup sweeper. It does so many things. And it's like a mid to high tier pick usually, but I still think this thing is a high tier mon in my head. This thing's a high tier mon because it does so many different things. Regenerator is a great ability, as most mons with Regenerator are really good, so that just adds on to it. You could also run the Magic Guard, as I mentioned earlier, Calm Mind Magic Guard with Recovery, because you get Recovery as well outside of Regenerator, which is also really good. And Psychic is just a really good setup type in general, and that's why I believe this. But it's just one of the best mons that you don't know what it's going to do until you get into the battle. And I know it's that way with a few mons, but I feel like Reuniclus is one of the best mons to do this with. And this thing is just really good. I love using it. I've used it with success, if you guys saw in the PEBA. And my first ever season in the URL in Gen 6, I used Reuniclus, and I used it to really good success. And I've seen a lot of other trainers, like Stromful loves Reuniclus, that have used it really well as well. So it's a good mon, and it is number 2 on the most underrated list. And we're going to move on to number 1. And before I reveal number 1, I do want to mention one more time that a lot of Pokemon could have made this list, but just missed out on the cut. Though if you were to make like a top 10 video of underrated mons, I'd probably agree with it, just because everything on this list is just kind of jumbled together. So that's kind of how this video has been going in the entire time. But I did ultimately come up with the number 1 pick, and that pick for my number 1 most underrated mon I think is in draft is Azelf. Now, you ever go on Smogon and just see sets that you just don't like? Well, Azelf is one for me. Azelf is like, it has Suicide Lead, and that's what it does in Smogon and in UU, and that's pretty good. I can understand that, but the fact that that's the only set in there really bothers me. And I think in draft it's really overlooked because this thing doesn't even get drafted a lot. This thing is like a mid-tier pick. I think it's mid to high tier, but it's usually in a mid-tier range. But I think this thing is just so good. This thing has really good coverage. It's got 125 in both attack and special attack, so you can choose your options. 115 speed tier, which is really good. You get U-turn. Going back to the Suicide Lead, you get like rocks, you get taunt, I believe, you get explosion, so you can just explode on anyone. And it gets Calm Mind as well, so that's really good. It also gets really good coverage moves as a psychic type. As I mentioned, Reuniclus earlier, it can do a bunch of different things, as well as Azelf can, because this thing could be a special attacker, a physical attacker. It gets Nasty Plot, that was a move it got. It can just automatically become a setup sweeper right there. It has not the greatest bulk, but psychic typing is a decent typing, so it's not usually taking super effective hits. So anything that's like not a strong neutral hit, usually you're going to be able to live. And with the speed tier, not many things are outspeeding you. You can be like a choice pivot because you have U-turn. This thing has so much potential to it, and I just haven't seen it really shine in the light of day. The only person I've ever seen use it like really well effectively is Aquarius in the PEBA. If you saw my battle against Aquarius in the PEBA, Azelf was a major problem, and I just think Azelf is a really good mon in general. I did draft it at the beginning of Gen 7, but that league sort of died really fast before I could get a really good grip on it. So I haven't had the fullest experience with it, but I know what it's like to go up against it, and I have a little bit of experience with it, and this thing is really good if you use it right. So the most underrated mon I think in draft is Azelf. So that is it for the video. Make sure to leave in the comment section below a comment on a mon that you think is underrated that maybe didn't make this list, or if you agree with me, explain why. I would like to hear about it. Also, if you disagree with me, I would like to hear about it in the comment section below. Just don't be a dick about it. Next week, I'm not sure what the top 10 is going to be. Again, I'm not going to be doing top 10 overrated mons because that sort of shines like a negative light on mons. I'm trying to keep this as much of a positive atmosphere as possible, so that's why I'm going to be skipping that. Plus, I have some really hot takes that nobody likes, so that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoy the orange hair because I just got it done. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you like Pokemon Draft League content, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm gonna head out of here. Have a fantastic day, YouTube.